by the audience's emotional response. And we were measuring the emotions via the heart rate and the skin conductance of the audience, and as those ebbed and flowed and fluxed, we were able then to program it so that it was a unique cinematic experience based on the cinema audience.
Is there anything you found out through that process that was maybe counterintuitive to what you thought of the genre?
Not of the genre. It actually helped to support the story architecture, and where it was like a 15-minute short, so you've got not long to tell the story in sort of a 3-act structure, but you've got to keep that momentum, you've got to keep that tension, you've got to make sure that you hold people in the right places. And what actually came out of it was the power of audio, and it was interesting. We actually ended up calling it, we had the hyper-real version that we ended up calling it, because it had absolutely no score whatsoever. It was only the sound effects, it was only what was experiencing as if you were there as a voyeur flying in the room. There was absolutely no score, and it was creepy. It was really creepy not having the score to it, because it was literally a 2-person character film, an old lady and a guy who'd come into the house unseen. I'll not give it away. Sometime you might get to see it. But the long and the short of it was that it was creepy. But it was funny as well, because we had a generative sound effect that if we felt that the audience wasn't scared enough, we would release this kind of subsonic frequency. It was almost like a pressure wave, and it just made you feel uncomfortable. And to a person in the audience, didn't matter who you were, if we released this, if it didn't seem that everybody was scared enough when we released this, it generally made everybody feel very uncomfortable. And we would watch we could see all the live responses on a bank of screens. We could see all the live responses dynamically change as we released this subsonic frequency. So for the genre, it actually just compounded what you experienced, what you would expect. For stuff like drama and maybe a slow-burning Scandinavian beautiful drama, you might find yourself that you'll see a very different pattern. It's a very different pattern of engagement, and that was what came out of this. There isn't a right or a wrong, but you can see that within different genres, different shooting styles, different grading, different camera angles, they all have their reasons for being there. The language of audio and visual has been around a long time. It's just now we're starting to see a science that we can apply to that helps minimize arguments and assist in creativity.
Did you notice any differences between different types of audiences?
There was one audience that we had, which was actually, for whatever reason, it was a much, much older demographic that turned up. We actually ran this in Belfast as well, from the Belfast Film Festival, and we ran it over 3 nights. And after the film, we had a different David Cronenberg film that we were screening. For whatever reason, there was a much older demographic for one of them, and it was a much higher response. It was a much higher rise and fall of engagement, and I don't know whether that's because of the natural biological changes. Your heart rate is naturally faster. You know, I don't know whether it was that caused the changes, but it was very interesting. It was very interesting nonetheless.
So, just to let you guys know, the Sensum tool will actually be used throughout the festival to emotionally rate certain movies here, and so there will be a Sensum award at the end of the festival. Now, we will, because this is a small audience, we'll be opening up to questions if anybody wants to pose a question. So I think, yeah, someone will come in back of you with a microphone.
Would there be mitigating factors such as fatigue that would influence the response?
I'm sorry, it's super, super quiet.
Would there be mitigating factors such as fatigue that would mitigate the response?
Yeah, caffeine, fatigue, alcohol, drugs, running for a bus, all of these things can have a bias. What our system does is it takes a baseline reading of your initial, initial connection, and then we're looking at variability, and we're looking at variability in context of the experience, the event, the film, the whatever that moment in time is that we're bookending that measurement for. And there are two ways to look at this. If you're looking at it from a deep qualitative analysis point of view, then you would need to do it over a much longer longitudinal study, where you're then looking at 1 to 5 bunch sets of people, and they're really giving you patterns and how they respond over a long period of time. And then in more of a quantitative side of things, then you can look at it statistically and take a large number of an audience, a large portion of the population, and do studies on them, and you can take a snapshot in time. So it very much comes down to the experimental design, the questions you want to ask, and the mitigating factors of the stuff you've got to take into account: sleep, fatigue, deprivation, hunger, caffeine, all in play their own factors in noise, but again, it comes down to experimental design.
This question might be for Mike as well, but what do you think are the weaknesses of maybe, having that insight into what emotions are? Is it maybe some sort of moving target that would be hard to reach? If you just, say the studio execs come to you and say, we need a film that makes people happy. Does that change? Is that a difficult target to reach?
I'm going to let Mike take that first. I'm happy to come in after.
You said take it first.
That's a tough one. I think trying to sort of define the success of a film in terms of eliciting one specific emotion, I don't know. I think storytelling is so nuanced that there are so many, any film, or whether it's long film or short film, can take you through so many different emotions, which is part of the story structure, classical story structure, which has been proven forever to work. Yep.
Gawain?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear?
Can you hear me?
David, I think you're going to have to talk through your mic.
I can completely, though, understand that having worked for one of the world's most market-driven or market analysis-driven companies, Walt Disney, that they would want to kind of nail on the head before they make anything what they're going to get in terms of response. But I think there's a little bit of danger in that, because no offense to the technology, but I think if you get too much data, you can try and second guess everything and put in a little bit of everything. For maybe you do different test markets, and you do one for the kids, you do one for the adults, you do one for the teenagers, and you put in something that elicits a response from each of those groups, and then you can get something that doesn't sit together that great as a story. A good example is Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I mentioned before. They tried to put in a little bit of everything, singing gargoyles, a little bit of sexual stuff with Frollo, and love story, but at the end of the day, the story was a big mess, because they were overthinking it and trying too much to guess each sector of the market. I don't know how. So back to your question, do I think it's useful to have a response, an overall response for happiness or for sadness for one film? I think that could be at the end misleading. I think it's not because of the technology, but because you're kind of leading yourself down a path maybe that is a little bit elusive. Yeah.
Did you have anything to add to that? Gawain?
Sorry, me?
Yeah.
I wasn't able to hear anything, so I'm I'm not sure what everybody said, but if I jump in on the original question, there are two arguments on this that I keep coming back around on. Homogenization needs to be avoided at all costs, and the general paranoia around this kind of thing is actually that, hey, do you know what? If we start using all this kind of analysis and tools and technology and everything, we're just going to end up with a mishmash chaos of homogeny, and there'll be absolute nonsense everywhere. It's a valid argument if you were going to rely on the technology and the tools and everything to tell you what to do. I don't actually see that to being the case. Every single piece of good media, good advertising, good TV, good film, good books, good comics, good games is all about emotional storytelling. If you are gifted, if you are creative, if you are capable, if you have put your homework in and studied and learned the art forms that you want to actually work in, then you'll be able to take from those that have taught us in those mediums and translate those into your own stories of emotional storytelling. Those that are best at doing their emotional storytelling will explode and blow people out of the water and will continue to get budgets to do whatever they want to do. What this kind of tool and technology can allow you to do is to convince those that usually are the bankrollers of this, of these very expensive mediums, to assist them in understanding, actually, here's a science that can help you to see and visualize an emotional moment. You can avoid that moment when the producer, director, and editor are screaming at each other in the face, telling each other that their cut has to be the one that goes through, by actually doing some testing with an audience in an emotional setting to tell the emotional story best. That's where I feel that these tools have a place. And then beyond that, it's about closing the emotional feedback loops. These tools and technologies could allow you to open up completely new entertainment experiences, completely new methods of storytelling, and will move us into that kind of world, which, whether you like it or you don't, whether you believe we should go or not, is the likes of the VR world and AI and emotional AI. So we're on a stepping stone to where these things are moving in the future, and whether you choose to take them as your own creative choice, I just think there's an awful lot they can do, and an awful lot you can choose to avoid if you're beautifully gifted at telling good emotional stories.
Now, speaking of creativity and artificial intelligence, Chef Watson, created by IBM, recently started creating recipes based on big data. And the goal of this was to say that we can create, through this artificial intelligence, creative recipes as well as any of the top chefs in the world. Now, do you see, given that you mentioned the artificial intelligence, do you see that creeping in, or some sort of data creeping into what we can create in terms of great, filmmaking? And I think actually, it's similar to what Akon has a studio in Montreal and works with a company in Montreal to create pop singles, songs based on data that tells you, use this formula and you're going to have a top 40 hit. Now, do you see any of that coming in filmmaking?
Every single industry has pretty much been gambling. For as long as it's been around, it's gambling. That's what entrepreneurship and innovation is. Get off your ass, you take what you know, you have a punt, see if it's going to work. If it works, then somebody might come in through a couple of quid, you do well. If you get some sales off the back of it, you can bankroll your own things and invent some new stuff. All that they're happening to do is just gamble on a different thing. They're gambling on an algorithm that's looking at some patterns and saying, actually, we think we can get a good pop tune. Can we put it out? Can we put it out? Can we put it out? And out of that, if they're spread betting, even if you look at it from a standard investment point of view, 1 in 10 will succeed. And then that's covered their costs. Why not? If they can do it, why not? There are people who can listen to it. This is what the beautiful art of A&R was. Listen to a band, see the energy on stage. Can they actually explode? Do they hold the audience in their hands? Brilliant. An A&R man is doing that. Now people are looking at that and being able to do the same kind of thing. It doesn't rule out the human. It just means that they're going to have some other tools to do it.
Now, has anyone approached you asking for some sort of emotional algorithm?
Oh, yeah. We will continue to we do better, the applications of it better. But if you would, see if you would be perfectly honest with you, the way that this would work best is that all biometrics, all emotions, all kinds of data in this kind of way were actually open source and free. That would be the way to move the society, the planet, and everything forward. Because you would just say, this kind of data can help collectively. It can help the medical industry and businesses. It can help food. It can help. I mean, the amount of kids that are eating crap food and having low energy and not being able to do things, and the parents don't care. Everybody's busy, or they don't have enough money to do this. No, I mean, the applications of algorithms and data in daily lives to all the patterns of things that you choose to do could help massively worldwide. But you'd need to open source it. You'd need to allow it so that it's free for all. At that point then, we're in a very good place. It's never going to happen. So it comes down then to commercialization. Do you trust those that are commercializing it? And where's the data going? Do you own it, or does somebody else?
Now, what would you, Spotify recently, yesterday, released playlists based on mood. Now, would you ever see your technology be able to classify movies or film or books based on mood and the emotional reaction?
Absolutely, absolutely. Funny enough, we pitched that to Spotify 18 months ago. Wonder where they got the idea. There's ever-increasing noise going out in different publications and things. I mean, say you're in the middle of Game of Thrones, and you're watching the most incredibly dark episode of it, but you're enthralled, you're in the moment, and all of a sudden it pops up and there's an advert with fluffy animals dancing about trying to sell you insurance, and then the next one is whatever. You've been so badly ripped out of your emotional zone to try and sell you some shit, and then they're going to dump you back in, and you'll have this ramp out, ramp in, where you've got to get back into the story where you were at that moment in time, and you're probably not going to get back to where it was. So this is where radio advertising is starting to look at it. TV advertising is very aware of it and would like to do something about it, but it would require a buy-in from the TV. It would require the home audience to have bought into the smart TV for it to be able to know that you're in a pissed off mood, or you're in the moment, you're in the zone of the show, where it then categorizes that you are not to be brought out to happy, happy, joy, joy, but give you something else, give you a different version of that Volkswagen advert. You know, that's when things start to become more reactive, but it's very much the audience, the home audience has to be happy to invite you in. They have to be happy enough that that's going to add to their viewing experience of Game of Thrones, and you're all right. You can read me and figure out how I am at the moment. Is that okay? Is it not? So that's the kind of thing where you can see these emotional recommendation engines starting to kick in.
Now, Mike, let's say you log on to Netflix and you see, Mike, we feel, you're in a relaxed state. Maybe you should watch, say, Pinocchio.
Funny because before we started with this panel, we were talking about the Apple Watch, the Apple Watch, that it can sense your skin temperature or something like that.
The health kit. Yeah.
Health kit, and that could possibly be used. That information could be used to suggest things for you to buy for your well-being or something like that. Honestly, personally, it scares me. I mean, a little bit. When I'm online and I see that ads are based on websites that I visit, I can see the practical application, but I wouldn't really want to. I don't know. Personally, it doesn't.
No, from the creative.
But from a creative, like in terms of if people are responding to something that I create, I guess to some extent, yeah, could be useful. Just circling back to the creative process, I just wanted to share a little anecdote about sort of this balancing this idea of doing what you think and doing what data gives you. When I was working at Disney, I was lucky enough to they had Chuck Jones, who was one of the Warner Brothers directors, directed a lot of the Bugs Bunny cartoons and many others over the years. Did the Grinch, the original Grinch TV special. And somebody asked him what was the secret to their success. The Warner Brothers guys and they were all guys who were making those films. There was a small group of them. They were called the Termite Terrace, and they made amazing cartoons. And someone asked, "What was your formula? How did you know what to do?" And he said, "We just did what made us happy. We just did what we liked, and the audience happened to like it too." And they're now classics. So personally, I think as a creative person, you have to do, I guess what I'm saying from this is that you have to do what excites you, what gets you motivated. And I think it's sort of like what I've found with teaching. This may sound kind of unrelated, but I teach people drawing, I teach people animation, I teach software for my job. But you can't really teach anyone to do anything. You can only show them your own passion for it. They have to teach themselves by actually doing that thing. So I think that when you create anything, a song or animation, film, whatever, if it's something that inspires you, then you have a good chance, I think, of inspiring your potential audience. I think where this line gets, crossed is when we're talking about money and big sums of money. And no offense to, Goran, or to anybody who wants to use this technology for that purpose, but I think that's where it's used. I can see practically coming, and I'm sure that Disney executives would have loved to have this kind of technology 20 years ago. But back to the whole thing of balancing getting data input and going with what you think, Disney had a big string of hits from Beauty and the Beast through Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and at that time there was one person in Disney Animation who was running the show, calling the shots. He had the last word, and after he left, after Lion King, that was the other one he was very, very much responsible for the success. After he left, the Disney quality of the stories went down, partly because they had too much data, because after he left, there was no one who had a vision or the personality to take charge, and they started making the stories by committee. Too much data. So I guess all I'm saying is it's a balance of getting data, but then really going with your gut and what you think is right. And then I think it's a lot of fine tuning. I think can be really great for that. So I don't know if that answers your question. And I'm curious personally to know what any of you, if you have an opinion about this or comments. Anybody?
Yeah. Maybe we'll just pass it and then. Thanks.
No, I was just gonna say it would stress me out if like Netflix could recommend to me things based on my emotion. I mean, what part of there would be like? I don't know how I'd feel about that. I don't know what it means. I don't know how that world works.
But just right now they do have algorithms that say if you watch this, you might like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
Does
what
that
I'm
scare
saying is
you,
I
or-
wouldn't be comfortable with it localizing in my emotions. I'd feel too exposed myself. I'm comfortable with it like recommending through genre, but nothing close to me, please.
I kind of agree with him. My biggest fear is that these financial moguls, will begin to decide what the public should watch, should listen to, should read, and unfortunately, the fear that I forget his name, that he had would the homogenization of society would occur, and the whole divergence, the whole individuality of society would disappear, and that's my biggest fear with technologies such as these. I mean, I can see that there is some benefit to it, I mean, basically from the point of view of the creator of the work. Does his formula work? And if it does, well, then he'll continue in that formula. And if he can make tweaks to his work, to make it a better response, that's great. But it's if it got in the hands of financial moguls that would decide for the general public what they watch, what they listen to, what they read, and etc. That's the biggest fear.
Any other questions? Yeah, there's.
Can I just follow up on what this gentleman said? Sorry, I'm just going to follow up on what. Sir, what's your name? Sylvan Mike. I agree with you completely, and I think that's part of this whole sequel phenomenon. I think it's part of that creation of the homogenization. That we're getting more of the same of what makes money, and it's the whole idea of sequels years and years ago, before there was a lot of market research, they just weren't made. So that's a kind of feedback loop that creates more of the same. So I share your concern, and I think technology is neutral at the end of the day. It's how we decide to use it. So hopefully it will be used for good purposes. Ma'am?
Yes, I was going to ask if this could be extended to show true emotions in one's daily life. This is transcending genre, just in terms of interactions between people, and that could get dangerous too.
Yeah, there are tools, and Sensum you could use for that as well. And there are other tools. There's a company called Muse in Toronto that offers an EEG headband that can allow you to. It sort of is that neurofeedback that can show you what state you should be in when you want to relax. Coming out of MIT, there's a lot of stuff with sociometric stuff, where you'd wear a badge and it can calculate how many people you've spoken to and the type of interaction you've had with them. So there are those types of tools that do exist as well. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Gawain, do you want to say a few last words, and then I'll wrap up?
Well, I just want to say thank you very much, guys. Hope Montreal is as sunny as it is here. Hope it's a little warmer than it is here. And I wish you all the very best for the Animation Festival, and perhaps get a chance to meet some of you all in person at some point in the future. Don't be scared.
Thanks, Gawain. Mike, do you have any final words?
No, I just want to thank Gawain for being here via Skype, and thank you to all of you for being here for this. And I think it's been really, really interesting, and thank you.
So just in summary, what this type of technology offers us is a way to answer creative questions. So obviously it's not supposed to be used to replace the creative process. Maybe it can be used to enhance it or at the very least guide it. But what I think it helps us do is find the little details, the details that give us goosebumps and help us enhance those aspects and help us decide, what type of ending is the best, or maybe what type of music will help get that reaction. But again, it's not something that's supposed to replace the creative process, but can help add to it. So I'd like to thank the Animes Festival and you all for being here. Thank you.